Howdy, Facebook Live. Sean Yesner here with Yesner Law, and I've got you here behind the scenes. We're recording a couple episodes of the Crushing Debt podcast. I've got my friend Cole Boling here with me. Say hello.
How's it going?
And so we're going to be, he's got his own coaching company, consulting company. So that's what we're going to be talking about. And so if you have questions, leave them here on Facebook Live. After we're done recording the podcast episode, we'll do some bonuses and we'll see if we can answer any questions on Facebook Live, and then tune back in about a half hour or so, give or take, and we're going to have the better half on the podcast. So you tune in for that as well in about I guess maybe 30 minutes plus or minus. So you ready to get started?
Absolutely.
Cool. On this week's episode of the podcast, Profit First with the Boling Group Coaching and Consulting Company. So welcome back to this week's episode of the Crushing Debt Podcast. Wow, right off the bat, I'm stumbling. Welcome back to this week's episode of the Crushing Debt Podcast. My name is Sean Yesner with Yesner Law. I was going to say stumbling Yesner with Yesner Law. This is the Crushing Debt Podcast. As you heard in the intro, I've got a guest with me this week. So interestingly, I met my guest because his wife stumbled on the podcast. I guess this whole episode is going to be about stumbling in some form or fashion. So stumbled on the podcast, listened to it, became a fan, reached out to me. I met with her and her husband and hit it off, and they are Profit First coaches. They're into the Profit First system. I've done a podcast about Profit First. I've got Profit First right there on the bookshelf as well. I've read it as well. And so I really wanted to have them on the show. So they are new Florida residents. They moved to Florida at the beginning of the year. They are from Kansas, and they are involved in real estate as well. So we know a lot of the same people in a lot of the same circles. But what I wanted to talk about today was the coaching, the consulting, goal setting, all those different types of things. So my guest on this week's episode is Cole Boling. Welcome, Cole.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
So I do want to take a real quick break before we get into the content. I do have to mention the sponsor of the show. So Elliott Wealth Management Services, they provide life insurance, term life insurance policies. If you have real estate, if you invest in real estate, if you have partners that you use to invest in real estate, you may want to go to their website, which is elliottwealth.com, and click on the tab in the upper right-hand corner, and that'll get you a free quote on life insurance. And that way, if something should happen to you and you've got real estate that needs to be taken care of, you've got partners that need to be bought out or taken care of, that's all what life insurance is for. So give Chris Calandra and his team over at Elliott Wealth a buzz. Go onto the website, click on the free life insurance assessment, see what you've got or what you need in terms of life insurance. But now that we've talked about our sponsors, we can get directly into the content of today's episode. So first question right off the bat, what brought you were from Topeka, right?
Yeah,
Kansas.
Topeka, Kansas. So
what brought you to lovely Florida as the hurricane is approaching? By the time this episode comes out, the hurricane will be gone.
Yeah.
But as we record it, the hurricane's approaching. What brought you to lovely Florida, lovely Tampa, Florida?
Well, very simply, it's not Kansas, where there's nothing. We have lakes that don't have alligators, so that's a good thing. However, no, my wife and I traveled a lot before we had kids. We have 3 young boys under 5. So in the first year or so of our first son, we traveled a ton with him and just always kept coming back to the Florida area. We had a friend move down here about 3 years ago, and that's when we came down, fell in love with the area, spent about 18 months, built a house here. And then we had it kind of as a second home, and then we just realized that it had to be home. And we moved down here in January, been here about 8 months now, and we are just, we love it. We're super happy here.
Nice. So, obviously podcast content should be evergreen, but we're talking about January of 19. You moved down here.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Cool.
Very, very good point.
And and that was my fault because I said, why'd you move? And I said that you moved in January. So no worries. You said 2,500 hours of coaching, but were you a coach in Kansas, or was that
Absolutely.
Okay, because I know you were also, your wife's involved in real estate. I know you were also involved in real estate. So how did real estate become coaching, or how do those two marry?
Yeah, absolutely. So in 2006, I got my real estate license. I've been a realtor for 13 years now, and joined Keller Williams back in 2011 and realized that they had a coaching division where you could actually join them and become a coach you got to be in the top elite of the company. And at that time, I had qualified to be one of those top agents, applied, and was accepted into their training program, was with them for upwards of 2 years, had at any given time about 35 coaching clients, all in the real estate business I was coaching regularly every single week. We were on the phone every week, along with all the extra training. And then from there, when I decided to go off on my own and do some of my own consulting and partnering with some other firms and businesses, I naturally created my own company now that I've now developed into a system where we do things from one-on-one coaching with your business. We do group coaching. We have, I'm even in the process of potentially creating a subscription kind of coaching where you just get like content after content after content, all the way up to what we're going to talk a little bit about is a Profit First program, right. Profit First Professional coaching program, which helps business owners find a way to have profit first in their business.
So your background's as a realtor, as an agent. Do you coach only realtors and agents or any business owner?
Any business owner. So what came of coaching is after I fell in love with coaching, I should say, first and foremost, is that what I realized through that whole process was that really helping people was my basis. And I noticed that my passion showed up and when I was helping people accomplish massive wealth, massive success. And at 1 year, in one of the years I was coaching, I went back and I tracked it. And of the coaching clients I had, they made $7.5 million in coaching with me.
Wow.
And I started thinking about that. And I was like, that is incredible wealth. And then I was like, how do we compound that? How do we take that a little bit further? So yeah, it's kind of one of those things where with the coaching, I do focus on real estate, yet business is business, right? I have coaching clients that are not realtors. It's all about the pillars of the business. Are you doing business correctly? Are you focusing in on your key areas of your business that create? It's usually about 3 items that create the most 80% of your business, basically, right. Is 3 items. Okay. And then you can really coach people into any aspect, no matter if they make 100 million or if they make 5,000. It doesn't matter. You can coach people to their pillar and help them with accountability through all those.
So what are those 3 pillars?
Well, I mean, here's the thing. So you always need to look at a business and you need to see, do they have a business plan? Simply enough, right?
A written business plan.
A written business plan. Thank you. Yeah. One of the things that we do know is if you don't write it down, it doesn't even exist.
Right.
Even if it's just in your head, it doesn't exist. Followed by a lead generation plan. Every single business has to have customers in order for them to be successful. I mean, just like you in law, if you don't have a way of generating clients, your podcast helps as a lead generation source.
Right.
If you don't have a good process to that and you're not making sure that you're continuously doing that, you're going to go out of business. And then last but not least, you have to have a good, basically business books, your financial pieces in play so that they all work together. So a good business plan, a systematic approach to generating clients, and how to budget have a budget model.
And that's a good transition for that third one, the financial plan. That gets us into the Profit First professional. But before we get there really quick, I did want to make sure I gave out all your contact information, which I'll give out a couple of times. We'll put in the notes. People can find it, whatever. But it's coleboling.com. COLEBOLING.com is the website.
Correct.
Cole@coleboling.com is the email address.
Yes.
And then I noticed you've got a bunch of testimonials on Facebook as well. So you can go to the Boling Group Coaching and Consultant Services is the name of the Facebook business page.
Yes.
Okay. So all 3 of those places, but let's get into Profit First. And so hopefully I'm describing it correctly. The whole concept of Profit First is most people will say revenue minus expenses equals profit. But what Profit First teaches us to do is say revenue minus what we pull in profit is what we have left for expenses.
There's
about basic.
Yeah, the biggest piece of the Profit First is allocating every fund that comes in into multiple accounts so that you can actually see what I can spend.
Right.
Because what I find in coaching is most people, like, for instance, most of the people that make a lot of money, but they don't allocate their funds correctly through their business, have no money.
Right.
And it's time and time again, I go, you made all this money and you have nothing to show for it. Or when the IRS comes knocking and going, hey, you got a big tax bill now. And they're like, I didn't even plan for it. So in the profit first system, the whole idea and the whole concept is that you have it allocated so that when that door gets knocked on, you're not freaking out a little bit, for lack of a better word.
It's the old system of having different envelopes. So I have an envelope for rent. I have an envelope for groceries. And I even remember, I think in the book, I think it came from the book where Mike Michalowicz, who wrote Profit First and heads up all that, said it was the concept of, if I've only got $100 in the grocery envelope, I can only spend up to $100. I can't spend 110. I don't have 100. It's $100 for groceries. I spend $100 or $90 and if I spend $90 and I've got $10 to allocate over to this other area.
Yeah.
And so that's basically, I mean, I know
he pulls a lot of it from the Dave Ramsey idea. Right. So Dave was very big, for many years now on the envelope system. And yeah, here's the problem. It just, in all honesty, is these concepts are not new.
Right.
These concepts are not hard.
Right.
Let me say it differently. These concepts are simple. They're not easy.
Right.
They are very, very simple to follow. The biggest reason you want a business coach, a professional to help you through this is really the accountability piece.
Right.
Because when you have to actually tell somebody the truth that you didn't watch your books, you didn't allocate your funds, you did not do it, is a whole lot more painful than just not doing it. Right? So when you get on the phone with me every week and I ask you, how's your allocation going? Where's your numbers at? What are we looking at? Send me your profit and loss statement. If I'm coaching 35 people, only 5 really send it to me. They just so scared they won't do it. And they know that it's because they don't want to look at their numbers. They don't want to believe it, which it's simple. You just input it, right? You input it, you allocate, input, allocate. They won't do it. It's amazing. And I would say it's less than 10% of business owners. If you surveyed all the business owners in Tampa, it'd be less than 10% have probably even looked at their bank accounts in 30 days.
Looked at my bank account this morning.
Because you're a smart business guy who deals with wealth, right?
Right.
And if you look at who's holding all the wealth of the business owners.
Well, and it's the end of the month and I have to make payroll. So I need to know what's in there.
but people who look at their accounts daily, they are always in the top % of the most wealthy of business owners because they know where their money is instead of their money doing whatever it does.
Right. And that's, like I said, that's the accountability piece. And that's why I like, and I've used business coaches before, and I completely believe in business coaches, and it's because of that accountability piece and who do you fit with, and the importance of getting the profit first coaching versus somebody else that doesn't have that kind of background, because not only the accountability piece, but the knowledge of, I mean, I deal with budgets every day, dealing with people in bankruptcy and dealing with people in foreclosure. And you may or may not be surprised. There's a lot of people that go through foreclosure where, for whatever reason, a lot of times what I'll say is, what I'll say is you've got a legitimate reason for filing the bankruptcy, but that doesn't rise to the level of a defense for filing the bankruptcy.
Makes sense.
And so they won't be able to make their mortgage payments, and they'll have a mortgage payment of whatever, $1,000 a month. Okay. And so we've got the foreclosure defense going on, and 5, 6, 7, 8 months later, I'll say, okay, how much have you been able to save up? And, $500, $800. And I'm not trying to pick on people, because these are the people that I represent as my clients. I get the mentality.
It's reality.
It's reality, but there's no system for budgeting. There's no system. Now, a lot of them come out with other good side effects. So yeah, I haven't been able to save up any money, but I've got no more credit card debt. Well, yeah, but because you've got no more credit card debt, we don't have the money we need to fund to save the house, to fund that loan modification, to help with whatever, repairs we need to make so we can sell it, whatever else is going on. So yeah, your debt's gone, but now the house is in jeopardy. So I like the idea of the profit first professional coaching. And so how does it work? In other words, you talked about the accountability piece, but do you literally go through the book with them? Do they buy a copy of the book? Do you just walk them through the different components of the budget? How does the Profit First professional coaching work?
Yeah, so it's really not that much different than having general business coaching. So first and foremost, it's you have to know exactly what you're going to be probably making, and if it's in terms of a business plan or whatever, right? So we start there. Then you do typically have to open up some bank accounts. There's typically 5 accounts, maybe 6, depending upon how it's set up. Each person's a little bit different. However, for the most part, you open up accounts, and here's what's really cool. There are some credit unions and banks in the area here that actually understand and work with the Profit First because it is becoming so popular.
Wow.
So it makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that, to go with a bank that understands the Profit First system. That'd be a tremendous idea.
Yeah. And so you want to figure out who those are. And when you coach with us, we help introduce you to those things. However, we're not accountants. So this is the biggest thing that we want people to understand is when you do this, it's more the accountability piece, the understanding, the knowledge. We'll explain the book, we'll explain the models, we'll explain the systems, we'll help you through it. And yet it's kind of like a personal trainer.
Right.
At the end of it all, I can walk in the gym with you. I can show you how to lift that weight, but I can't lift the weight for you.
Right.
So I'm not going to input your numbers for you. I'm not going to make sure that all of them are actually correct. You can get an accountant to do that for you, or a CPA or something of that sort. Ultimately, we're going to give you the foundational pieces. We're going to hold you accountable to building a habit so that you actually open your accounts, allocate the funds. And then what's really cool about it is the more you make, the more the allocations change. Right. So it's not, a lot of people think that the percentages are the same always, and they actually are not. I mean, the more you make, the tax percentage may go down, it may go up depending upon where you're at, right? So each one, how much you can spend, how much you save, all of those things change over the course of how much you make. So as you coach with a Profit First professional, one of the things that you learn is that I'm going to figure out exactly how to budget and budget correctly based on every dollar. And as you do it over time, you're going to really get really good at knowing how much you can spend, and then you don't get into debt.
Okay. Nice. So I do, for those that are regular listeners, I read a ton. I think I'm on book 28 so far for this year, something in that range. Profit First, though, is one of those that's always stuck with me. So I would suggest anybody that's struggling a little bit, give Cole a buzz. Not only that, but go pick up Profit First. Go read Profit First. It's a very quick read. It's a very, like you said, it's simple, but it's not necessarily easy.
Sure.
So go ahead and pick it up. Give Cole a buzz. You and I were also talking prior to, or communicating, we were emailing back and forth prior to. I want to talk a little bit about goal achievement, because that's one of those things that I'm really big on is setting written goals, hitting written goals. I've done another episode on my system for getting my goals. So talk about goal achievement. And I know when we were going back and forth by email, it was goal achievement, but it was also helping to eliminate a lot of those pain points as well. So talk about that for a little bit.
So this one always kind of makes me, I guess, giggle in a sense. Like I don't know if it's just me being a little facetious when I'm coaching people, yet if somebody has a goal, let's say their goal is to make $200,000. Okay. And in that $200,000, right now they're trending to be off by $20,000. They're going to miss their goal. They're going to make 180. A lot of people are going to be like, hey, that's pretty good, especially if they've never done it before. Right. Yet the goal was 20,000, right? 200. So 200. So we call that the gap. So the gap to the goal is $20,000, right? Right. So here's where I like to kind of mess with people. If you just take a very basic mutual fund at 5% compounded, and I usually factor wherever they are in their life. Let's just say they're going to retire in 25 years. So I just pull out a little compound interest calculator, right? And I get people to see something. I type in the number and I factor by years, compounded annually at a 5%. Sometimes I'll do an 8%, depending upon where the market is that day, just to kind of, or how much I need to give that pain point to somebody. Right. I did 12% on somebody. I was like, well, if you're playing aggressively, you can get 12%. So all it is I take the compound interest and I say, it's really interesting. You think you're only missing your goal by 20, but compounded over the next 25 years at just a marginal 5% growth, you're actually missing your goal by $128,000. Wow. What would and then I'll go back to them. Here's the pain. What would $128,000 do for you right now? Or better yet, who could you help with $128,000?
What could you do? What could you,
So would it be okay, Sean, if we did one more thing in order to get us that 20,000 gap closed and hit goal?
Yeah, that's in it, because you always go with the concept of, what is it? Shoot for the moon. You may miss, but you'll hit the stars.
Yeah.
But to then turn it around and say, because people do stuff because they either get pleasure from it or they avoid pain. And if you can combine both,
exactly,
hitting that 20,000 gives you the pleasure of hitting your goal and reduces the pain of losing even more than that, compounded over time.
Well, here's the other thing is, if you've never made that much money, you never even made 200, right? Yet your bills don't even equate to that. You don't even need to make that much money.
Right.
Here's where it gets really hard. And I see most business professionals going through this where they don't necessarily know why they need to make 200 or 500 or 10 million, whatever. They don't know why. And it's hard to get into the mindset of giveaway, right? However, here's what's interesting is most people don't understand that, hey, I'll make that extra 20 because of a lot of our programming as a kid, that we can buy something, we get a nicer car or whatever. If we get them into the mindset, or we get them out of that mindset and we get them into an investing mindset where it's like, no, just take that extra 20 and forget about it, put it into a mutual fund of some kind, even on a basic 5%, which is what the stock market has grown over all of its time, right?
Right.
That's how it comes out. It gets people out of their mindset. So then they see how that can actually equate into something much larger. Well, here's what's interesting is if you go spend that money, you're never going to do it again. Like, it's never going to make any sense, right?
Right.
If you turn that in and did that year after year and increased and saw what that could do, that's how some people, if they're 30, can retire by 40.
Right.
The compound interest is phenomenal.
Well, and if I remember the profit first system properly, part of it is giving back. Part of it,
Yep.
So it more than just the material stuff, more than just the retiring early, there's another piece of profit first that is giving back. And so if you hit your goal and made that extra 20 and became, 6 figures, 7 figures over the course of time, even take, a few percentage points of that and give it back to your community, or give it back to, wherever religious organization you belong to, or alumni organization, or, whatever.
Yep.
And there's more money that you can use to fund the karma bank, so to speak.
So my favorite saying is, money is only good for the good you do with it.
That's awesome. I like that.
Yep.
I like that. So we're almost out of time. Is there anything that we forgot to talk about? Anything you wanted to add?
Oh, wow. That's a loaded question.
I want to make sure I took notes, but I wanted to make sure we didn't forget anything.
So the biggest thing to consider is that, if you are interested in coaching with me, it doesn't matter what kind of profession you're in. Real estate itself, I know you have a lot of listeners that are realtors, or if you're in some kind of business setting, it doesn't matter if you clean houses for a living or you run a 400-person fleet of electrical, whatever, right? The concepts together are the same. You just have to figure out what are my core pieces of my business, compound that depending upon the size of your business. Every business I've ever looked at, if you take a business that's making $50K net revenue every year, or a business that's making $5 million net revenue every year, there's still 3 core pieces. It's just that the same core, and they're probably close to the same that they were 50, 5 million. They've just learned how to compound that. And then one last thing I really want everybody to understand is it takes 66 days now. The old idea was it takes about 28 days to build a habit.
Right.
Well, that's been debunked. So there's a book called The One Thing written by Gary Keller.
Yep, I read The One Thing.
And in there, they actually talk about...
it might be up there somewhere.
If not, I've got a copy I can get you.
I know, I read it.
They've proven now that it's 66 consecutive days
Wow.
of doing something over and over. So if the simple habit that we're talking about is just opening up your bank account every morning,
right,
allocating funds, it's going to take you an average of 66 days before you actually will change anything about doing that.
Huh. Okay.
So here's the biggest problem is, oh, this sounds great. And we know that a lot of people are probably listening, and I'm sure you got questions. The reality of it is nobody's going to do it long enough unless they do it 66 days, because they'll go right back to the way they were.
Right. Wow. That's interesting. I didn't know that had changed. Maybe it's because I read old books. Who knows? But
old
that's
soul.
Yeah. Well, but thank you. I appreciate you being on this week's episode of the podcast. Definitely if you are interested in the Profit First Professional system, interested in working with a Profit First professional, if you're interested in the system, if you want to go pick up the book, if you want to coach with Cole, again, he's on Facebook. It's the Boling Group Coaching and Consultant Services, or you can reach him at Cole, C-O-L-E, at Cole Boling, COLEBOLING.com, or go to the website, coleboling.com. Thank you very much for being on this week's episode.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so what I've been saying the last couple of episodes out of my book is that we hope that you have more money at the end of the month and not more month at the end of the money. So with that, we're going to wrap up this week's episode, and we look forward to talking to you in next week's episode of the Crushing Debt Podcast. Okay, cool. So we're still on Facebook Live, but we're done recording. So
any questions?
No, but Rick is another podcaster. He's got a couple different shows. I don't know if he's still watching, but he's got a couple of different shows. He said Kansas has twisters. I think that's just them. How accurate was the movie Twister?
We lived in Kansas our entire life, and I never saw a tornado my entire life. Now there are places in Kansas like. Let me say this. I've seen one come down and go right back up, but like the whole it takes out entire towns. That's more like Oklahoma, and Joplin, as a lot of people realize. There's a lot of those things that I would say more upper Texas, Oklahoma gets it way more than Kansas actually does. A lot of the times you'll see them out in western Kansas because it's coming right over the Rockies, and then it's really formulating. So you just don't hear about them as much because they don't really do. They're out kind of nowhere.
Well, Rick is actually still watching, so thank you, Rick. We appreciate it. Rick, for those of you that don't know, you want to check him out. I doubt I'm going to do his last name justice, so I'm going to spell it Savoia. But go check out Rick. He's got a couple of different shows. A two-way radio show, and then he also has a Facebook live stream. I want to say it's every Saturday, where he drinks wine, talks about wine. Really, I've watched a couple of them. Really cool show. If you're interested in wine, if you want to know more about wine, definitely check out. I'll give Rick a little plug, even though he's not a guest on the show. But I do bump into him at all the different podcaster seminars, Podfest, and all that kind of stuff. So thank you, Rick. Appreciate that. Otherwise, it does not look like we've got any other questions. So I'm going to stop the Facebook stream here, and then we'll change up a little bit and get ready for recording the next episode.